Good morning. Every one of us walked into this room carrying a story, some of us heavy with it, others trying to hold it together with a smile. And here's the truth. The bravest thing we'll ever do is show up as we are, not as we think the world wants us to be. When I talk about 10 things you must work on every day, I don't mean another checklist for self-improvement or a set of rules you'll fail at and then use as ammunition against yourself. What I mean is this: 10 daily practices that remind us of who we are and what matters most when the noise of the world tells us otherwise. Because courage isn't a single act, it's a practice. Connection isn't an accident, it's a choice. And joy isn't a luxury, it's a discipline. So this isn't about fixing yourself. You're not broken. It's about showing up with your whole heart every single day in small, ordinary moments that, when stitched together, become an extraordinary life. Today, I want to walk with you through 10 things that matter deeply and that we must practice imperfectly, but consistently if we want to live with courage, compassion, and connection. Radical self-compassion is not something most of us were taught. In fact, many of us were raised on the belief that self-worth had to be earned through achievement, perfection, or the approval of others. We learned to hustle for our value, to wear our productivity as proof that we were enough, to disguise our exhaustion as dedication. And somewhere along the way, we absorbed a dangerous lie that kindness and compassion are things we extend outward, while our own hearts are meant to be ruled by discipline and criticism. But here's the truth. Self-compassion is not indulgence. It's not laziness. It is the foundation of resilience, connection, and courage. Without it, we are building a life on quicksand. Every day, we speak to ourselves more than anyone else ever will. The inner dialogue, the quiet whisper of judgment or kindness, creates the landscape of our lives. When that inner voice is harsh, unforgiving, and relentless, it erodes our confidence and feeds shame. But when that voice becomes kinder, gentler, more accepting, we create space for growth. Think of the difference between a teacher who berates every mistake and one who encourages learning from them, who thrives in the long run. The same applies within us. Practicing self-compassion is not about ignoring accountability. It doesn't mean shrugging and saying, "Oh well, I'll never change." It means telling ourselves the truth with clarity, but without cruelty. It means recognizing that mistakes are part of being human, not evidence of our unworthiness. When we stumble, as we all do, the question is not whether we failed, but how we choose to respond. Do we pile shame onto the wound, or do we offer ourselves the same care we would give to a friend? There's an exercise I often suggest. When you catch yourself in self-criticism, pause and ask, would I say this to someone I love? Most of the time, the answer is no. We are merciless with ourselves in ways we would never be with others. Radical self-compassion asks us to flip that script, to see ourselves not as problems to be solved, but as humans to be cared for. This practice is radical because it goes against the cultural narrative that worth is conditional. It resists the myth that we must earn rest, earn joy, earn belonging. Self-compassion says, you are worthy, full stop. And when we begin to live from that truth, everything changes. We become more authentic in relationships. Because we are no longer performing for approval, we take risks because our identity is not tethered to the outcome. We stop numbing ourselves with perfectionism or busyness, because we are no longer trying to outrun the fear of not being enough. Radical self-compassion also strengthens empathy. When we are at war with ourselves, it's hard to hold space for others. Our judgment of ourselves often spills into how we see the world. But when we soften toward our own flaws, we naturally soften toward the flaws of others. Compassion within becomes compassion without. This is how self-acceptance ripples outward and creates deeper connection. The daily practice of self-compassion is small, simple, and incredibly hard. It might look like taking 3 deep breaths before answering the voice in your head. It might look like writing down one thing you're proud of, even if the day felt like a mess. It might look like giving yourself permission to rest, not because you checked off every box, but because you are human and you matter. These are not grand acts, but they are powerful acts of resistance against the culture of never enough. At the end of the day, self-compassion is not about becoming perfect at loving ourselves. It's about choosing, moment by moment, to be a little less cruel, a little more gentle, a little more forgiving. It's about remembering that our worth is not a prize to be won. It's already ours. When we practice radical self-compassion every day, we create a life rooted not in shame but in dignity, not in striving but in wholeness, and that changes everything. Connection is something we all crave, whether we admit it or not. From the moment we are born, we are wired for belonging, for closeness, for being seen and known. Yet, one of the great paradoxes of connection is that the very thing we long for most, authentic relationship, requires the very thing we are most afraid of, vulnerability. We want to be loved, but we hesitate to be fully seen. We want to belong, but we hide the parts of ourselves we fear will lead to rejection. And so often, instead of showing up with our whole selves, we put on armor. We edit our stories, polish our edges, and present curated versions of who we are. It feels safer, but it costs us the very connection we're aching for. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is not oversharing every detail of our lives or putting all our struggles on display without discernment. Vulnerability is simply honesty without a mask. It's saying, this is me, imperfect, uncertain, sometimes messy, and I'm willing to let you see it. And it is the birthplace of love, trust, and intimacy. Without it, our relationships stay shallow, transactional, and fragile. With it, relationships deepen, grow, and sustain us in ways nothing else can. The daily practice of vulnerability looks ordinary, but it is anything but easy. It's telling someone, I don't know, when you're expected to have the answer. It's admitting you're hurt instead of pretending you're fine. It's reaching out first, even when you fear rejection. It's allowing others to care for you when you'd rather white-knuckle your independence. These moments require courage, but they are also the moments where connection begins to weave its strongest threads. Think about the conversations that have mattered most in your life. Rarely are they the ones where everything was polished and perfect. They are usually the moments where someone said, "Me too," when you thought you were alone, or when you confessed a struggle, and instead of judgment, received understanding. Those are the encounters that remind us we are not alone, that our humanity is shared, and that our flaws do not make us unworthy of love. Vulnerability creates the doorway for these experiences, but only if we are willing to step through it. Of course, vulnerability is risky. Sometimes we will share and not be met with kindness. Sometimes people will misuse our openness. That pain is real, but the answer is not to stop being vulnerable altogether. The answer is to practice discernment, choosing carefully who has earned the right to hear our stories. Vulnerability is not about spilling everything to everyone. It's about choosing to be open with people who can hold that openness with respect and care. When we find those people, the reward is connection that is not performative or conditional, but deeply rooted in mutual trust. On a daily basis, vulnerability also means refusing to numb ourselves. We cannot selectively numb. When we try to block out fear, disappointment, or grief, we also block joy, gratitude, and love. Vulnerability asks us to feel it all, the highs and the lows, and to share that reality with others rather than pretending we have it all together. It means daring to believe that our imperfections are not barriers to belonging, but bridges to deeper understanding. Living this way is not easy. It will mean awkward silences, conversations that don't go the way we hoped, and moments when we wish we could crawl back into the safety of pretending. But over time, the reward is a life filled with genuine relationships rather than hollow ones, real intimacy rather than surface-level interactions, and the profound relief of being fully known and still loved. At the heart of it, connection requires vulnerability, because love cannot survive in the absence of truth. When we allow ourselves to be seen as we are, we extend an invitation to others. See me, know me, love me anyway. And when they say yes, when they meet us there, we discover what our hearts have been longing for all along, belonging that is real, grounding, and life-giving. Boundaries are one of the greatest acts of love we can offer to ourselves and to the people around us. Yet many of us struggle with them because we've been taught that boundaries are walls, that they push people away, that saying no makes us selfish, cold, or difficult. But boundaries are not barriers. Boundaries are clarity. They are the lines that define what is okay and what is not okay. And they create the conditions where love, respect, and trust can grow. Without them, our relationships become murky, resentments pile up, and connection erodes. With them, there is honesty, safety, and room for authenticity. The daily practice of boundaries is not glamorous, but it is essential. It is choosing to say no when you're stretched too thin, instead of saying yes and resenting it later. It is speaking up when someone crosses a line, instead of quietly absorbing the hurt. It is deciding what you will and will not allow into your mental, emotional, and physical space. Boundaries are how we teach people how to love us, and they are also how we love ourselves enough to protect our energy, our values, and our well-being. The hard truth is that most of us want connection without conflict. We fear that setting boundaries will make people angry or push them away. But the reality is that lack of boundaries often leads to far greater conflict. When we continuously override our own needs to accommodate others, resentment builds. That resentment eventually leaks out through withdrawal, passive-aggressive comments, or emotional distance. Boundaries may feel uncomfortable in the short term, but they prevent the long-term damage of dishonesty and resentment. In this way, boundaries are not a betrayal of love, they are the foundation of it. Think of a time when someone you love clearly expressed their boundary to you. Maybe they told you, "I can't talk right now, but I care and I'll call you tomorrow." Or, "That joke doesn't sit right with me. Please don't say it again." At first, it may have felt awkward or even stung a little, but underneath, didn't it also create a sense of trust? Their honesty gave you clarity. You didn't have to wonder where you stood. You knew the rules of engagement, and that clarity built respect. Boundaries, when communicated with kindness, deepen rather than diminish connection. Everyday boundary work also means respecting the boundaries of others. It means not taking someone else's no as a personal rejection. It means honoring their limits without trying to manipulate or guilt them into changing their mind. Just as our boundaries are about protecting our own well-being, theirs are about protecting theirs. Mutual respect is what allows relationships to thrive without breeding resentment or control. Setting boundaries is rarely comfortable. It often feels like vulnerability because it requires us to speak truthfully about what we need. Sometimes people won't like it. Sometimes they will push back. But holding those lines is an act of courage. It is saying, "I value this relationship enough to be honest with you, and I value myself enough not to abandon what matters to me." That kind of clarity is not selfish. It's sacred. Over time, boundaries free us. They allow us to show up in our relationships without pretense or bitterness. They give us the capacity to love wholeheartedly because we are no longer pouring from an empty cup. They build trust because people know where we stand and what we stand for. And they remind us every day that love without boundaries is not love. It's enmeshment. It's exhaustion. It's erasure. Real love, grounded in respect and clarity, requires boundaries. When we practice boundaries daily, we are practicing love in its most honest form. We are saying to ourselves, "You are worthy of protection," and to others, "I want to walk with you in truth, not in resentment." And that kind of love is the only kind that lasts. Gratitude is often misunderstood as a feel-good exercise, a way of ignoring hardship by focusing only on the positive. But real gratitude is not about denial. It is about grounding. It does not erase struggle, grief, or disappointment. Instead, it gives us a steady foundation to stand on when life feels heavy. Gratitude says, yes, this is hard, and yes, there is still something here worth holding on to. It is not a posture of pretending everything is fine. It is a practice of remembering that joy and pain can exist side by side. Every day, life gives us countless invitations to complain, compare, and overlook the ordinary moments that sustain us. Our culture thrives on scarcity. It tells us we are always behind, never enough, missing out, lacking something essential. Gratitude interrupts that narrative. It shifts our attention from what we don't have to what we already hold. And while it may sound simple, that shift is radical. Because when we live in scarcity, we are restless and anxious. When we practice gratitude, we step into sufficiency. We begin to see that what we have, who we are, and where we are right now can be enough. Gratitude as a daily practice doesn't require grand gestures. It's not about waiting for life's big wins. It's about noticing the ordinary, the cup of coffee that warms your hands, the laugh that lightens your heart, the quiet moment when someone sees you and says, "I get it." These are the threads that weave a life of meaning, and gratitude is how we make sure we don't miss them. When we pause long enough to name them, we root ourselves in presence instead of drifting into the future or spiraling into the past. Research shows what many of us intuitively know. Gratitude changes our brains. It rewires the way we perceive our lives. The more we practice it, the more our awareness shifts. Instead of scanning the horizon for danger, disappointment, or lack, we begin to notice goodness. And that shift doesn't just affect us. It ripples outward. A person grounded in gratitude is more generous, more patient, and more open. Gratitude creates fertile soil for empathy, compassion, and joy. Of course, gratitude is not always easy. There are seasons when it feels impossible, when grief, loss, or hardship take up all the space in our lives. In those times, gratitude is not about forcing ourselves to say thank you for the pain. It's about finding even the smallest anchor. Maybe it's the presence of a friend who sits silently beside you, or the sunlight streaming through a window, or simply the fact that you took a breath and survived another day. Gratitude in dark seasons is not about denying the darkness. It's about refusing to let it have the final word. Practicing gratitude daily requires intention. It might look like keeping a journal and writing down 3 small things each night before bed. It might look like saying out loud at the dinner table what you appreciated about your day. It might look like pausing in the middle of chaos to take one deep breath and whisper, "Thank you." The form doesn't matter as much as the consistency. Gratitude is like a muscle. The more we use it, the stronger it becomes. In the end, gratitude as grounding is not about changing our circumstances, but about changing how we inhabit them. It is about recognizing that even in uncertainty, Even in struggle, there is still beauty, still connection, still moments worth cherishing. When we practice gratitude every day, we are not bypassing pain. We are choosing not to be consumed by it. We are saying, life is hard and life is also good. And holding those truths together is what allows us to live with open hearts, steady feet, and deep joy. Curiosity is one of the most underestimated daily practices we can choose, and yet it has the power to change everything about how we relate to ourselves, to others, and to the world. Most of us think we are naturally curious, but what often masquerades as curiosity is actually judgment in disguise. Instead of asking with openness, we approach with conclusions already in N. We don't wonder, we assume, and assumptions close doors. Genuine curiosity, on the other hand, cracks us open. It invites us to step out of certainty and into humility, to trade the armor of being right for the freedom of truly listening. Every day, we encounter moments where our default response is to judge or defend. Someone cuts us off in traffic, and we label them selfish. A colleague disagrees with us in a meeting, and we prepare our rebuttal instead of wondering what they see that we don't. Even in our closest relationships, we often trade curiosity for control, assuming we know what someone meant, instead of asking, assuming we know what they feel instead of letting them tell us. Curiosity interrupts this cycle. It softens our edges. It asks, what else might be true here? Curiosity requires vulnerability, because it means admitting we don't have all the answers. For many of us, that feels uncomfortable, even threatening. We've been trained to equate certainty with competence and control, but certainty is brittle. When new information arrives, it cracks. Curiosity, however, is flexible. It allows us to stay open, to adapt, to keep learning. In our workplaces, this makes us better collaborators and leaders. In our families, it makes us better partners, parents, and friends. And within ourselves, curiosity helps us replace shame with compassion. Instead of berating ourselves, why did I mess up again? We can ask, what can I learn from this? That small shift changes everything. Daily curiosity also means staying awake to the beauty and wonder of ordinary life. Children remind us of this constantly. They ask questions endlessly about the color of the sky, the shape of clouds, the way ants march in a line. Somewhere along the way, many of us stop asking. We become so focused on efficiency, productivity, and certainty that we forget how to marvel. But when we reclaim curiosity, we notice again. We pause to ask about someone's story. We listen to understand rather than to reply. We see the extraordinary hiding inside the ordinary. Of course, curiosity can feel risky. It can lead us to uncomfortable truths. Asking, how did I contribute to this conflict, is harder than blaming someone else. Wondering, what is this person really trying to say beneath their anger, is harder than dismissing them. Curiosity doesn't always give us answers we like, but it does give us honesty. And honesty is what allows growth, healing, and connection to take place. The practice of curiosity can be simple. It can be as small as pausing before reacting and saying, tell me more. It can be as personal as asking yourself each morning, what do I need today? It can be as relational as wondering, what's it like to be them right now? These are not big or dramatic actions, but they are daily acts of courage. They remind us that being human is not about having it all figured out. It's about staying open to the mystery, the learning, the unfolding. When we choose curiosity every day, we are choosing humility over judgment, presence over assumption, and wonder over numbness. We are choosing to see life not as a problem to be solved, but as a story to be explored. And in that exploration, we discover compassion, creativity, and connection that certainty could never give us.